And I assume, Kyle, you and Amy will both record the way you have before.
Yes.
It's good to have it back up. And Skylar, if you can record too, that's good.
Actually, it was like 2 gigabytes.
Okay, looks like we have the live stream going, so let's go ahead and start the recording and let the people in from the waiting room. It's good to have it back.
Nicole, can you make me co-host, please?
So good morning, everyone. We're just getting started and everyone's logging on.
Good morning, Mr. Lilly. Can you hear us?
Yes, I hear you. Good morning, Mr. Gonzalves.
Good morning.
And Mr. Prager, I certainly see you. Can you speak? I just want to make sure I can hear you. Yes, good morning. And Mr. Hess, good morning as well. So, all right. I'm just going to double check. I want to make sure our recording is going. Yes, we have our recordings going. So good morning, everyone. This is a continuation of the Administrative Hearings Office hearing on the draft cease and desist order that the State Water Board's Division of Water Rights Assistant Deputy Director filed on November 12, 2019 against Kevin Gonzalves, and the administrative civil liability complaint against Mr. Gonzalves that the Division of Water Rights issued on May 5, 2020. Mr. Gonzalves has requested hearings in both of these matters. And I'm not going to read any of the other introductory material. I covered that during the first day of hearing on July 17 and the second day of hearing, which was yesterday, July 30. Today is July 31st. So I believe where we are, we finished yesterday with the prosecution team's rebuttal evidence, and their exhibits were processed and admitted subject to the limitations I stated on the record yesterday. So I believe today we are ready to proceed with Mr. Gonzalves' rebuttal exhibits. And I'm just going to tell you, I have a proposal for proceeding that I think will be efficient, not deprive anyone of their rights, and yet will allow us to go forward fairly expeditiously. And that is as follows. Mr. Gonzalves, I have received your written testimony in your exhibits, which we have numbered as 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, and 48. And I have read that all. They're short, to the point, they're very clear, and it's clear what they're responding to. I do not think it is necessary for you to summarize those unless there is something in them you want to say. I am willing to accept these as testimony. And of course, I've read them and will read them again. You will definitely still be subject to cross-examination by Mr. Prager, but do you have any desire to add further summaries to these testimony exhibits, or is it acceptable to you if we just admit them into the record as written?
Oh, hello, Mr. Lilly. Yeah, to be honest with you, I'm a little burnt out. I'm suffering a little bit of PTSD, and I would actually appreciate that, but I'm fearful of past history if I don't get it on a recording or don't get it out for the public on the YouTube, that maybe I'll be attacked and I won't get it on the recorded record. I'm a little scared.
Yeah, well, and so I understand. I don't know about the part about being attacked. I can't say anything about that, but I do understand your desire to make sure it's in public, and the YouTube just records what we say during the hearing. So if you don't provide an oral summary, it won't be on YouTube. However, we do post all of these exhibits. We have posted them all on the Administrative Hearings Office FTP site. So they are available. Of course, they're public record. You can post them or send them to anybody you want. So I think we can take care of that problem. I mean, critics, people out there in the world can say whatever they want, regardless of how they're posted. But I think they are publicly available, and I don't think there's a lot to be gained by providing a summary. You know, if you're burnt out, I certainly understand that this is a tough hearing. And not providing a summary won't in any way affect our processing of this hearing. You know, my colleagues and I have read them and will read them. So there's no real added value to providing a summary. So I suggest we dispense with the summary and move forward. That's what I'm going to do. So I do want to ask you about a couple of your other exhibits and basically just the purposes for why you have offered them. So I'm going to go through them one by one, and you don't need to provide argument, but if you can just provide a short explanation, then I think that will help us for covering all of them. So we have labeled your first exhibit, which is the Crocker-Huffman deed, as exhibit Gonzalves 40. That appears to be the complete copy of the agreement between the Merced Irrigation District and Crocker-Huffman, where the prosecution team had just submitted some excerpts. So was your purpose of offering that just to have the complete agreement in the record?
Yes, sir. There was additional statements in there that talked about just right-of-ways and easements, and I contend that what they're calling 150 foot is just a right-of-way. They don't own my land.
Okay, and that's certain. And if it's in there, and if we admit that into evidence, then you can certainly address that in your closing brief, which will be an easier way to do it because you can make arguments. You can take your time to develop your written arguments. So, and I'm not ruling on any of these yet because I know Mr. Prager. I want to give him an opportunity to respond to your offer of these exhibits before I make a ruling. So, exhibit Gonzalves 41 is the exhibit C map. I assume the purpose of that was just again for completeness to have the agreement with exhibit C in the record. Is that correct?
Yes, that's
okay.
Correct.
And then exhibit Gonzalves 47, it's titled Stevenson MID Agreement Regarding Water Deliveries, and I believe that was a fairly extensive agreement. What was your purpose for offering that?
Well, I was accused of harming Stevenson by the MID, and I proved through the emails that I did not harm anybody. And the Stevenson agreement allows for distribution of water from 8 other tributaries. It's not my responsibility to deliver water to them, and I just wanted it to be a true and correct, complete document, because there's more stuff in there that talks about other legal arguments that I don't have the capacity to reprove or retry, but it's already been, I don't know if you call them precedential or case law, maybe is the word you use.
Okay, well, the main thing is you want to have the agreement in the record. And that's fine, because if it's in the record, then you can cite to it, Mr. Prager can cite to it, I can cite to it in the proposed order, and we have it there. So I understand that. Okay, 48 was more of your rebuttal testimony. 49, and I don't know if you need to have Nicole put this up on the screen. This appears to be an aerial photo of part of your property. It looks like your properties, including the parcels we discussed yesterday. What was your purpose for offering this? And maybe it would help if we put, if Nicole, if you can put exhibit Gonzalves 49 up on the screen. And if you're familiar with that, Mr. Gonzalves, you can go ahead and tell me why you have offered that.
I'm still a little bit in shock from yesterday. I was a little.
Okay, we'll get it. Okay, now we have the exhibit up on the screen. So this was one of your exhibits. So just briefly tell me what this is and why you have offered this.
Oh, well, thank you for reminding me. That's
well, there are a lot of exhibits here in this record, so we have to keep track of them.
Yeah, that's the start of the survey. The points that I tried to put in photos to show you that you don't have to walk down the embankment to see that the points of my property are within Canal Creek. And I really, after the shock of yesterday of 1929 datum being overlaid onto 1978 datum to current 2020 technology, I was in shock, and I wanted you to see that this is true and accurate. The points of my property are within the Canal Creek. There was some discussion of points number 324. I don't know if you can see it on the map, if she can zoom in. All of those numbers designate a boundary. Can you zoom
Okay,
into.
yeah, and I have a paper copy here, so, and she can zoom in as well. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you.
So
So
just let me back up, Mr. Gonzalves. Who prepared this exhibit and most importantly, all of these points that are shown on this exhibit?
licensed surveyor, his name is Casey Lowry.
Okay, and had you hired him to do this?
Yes.
Okay, when did he do this survey?
Just this year, a month ago, maybe, before we started this case, I had started hiring him, and COVID created some issues for him, and he was pulled off to a bigger client. So I can look for the exact dates if you'd like.
No, that's fine. We're gonna have to address whether or not this is admissible without him testifying, but we'll come to that in just a minute. I first just want to learn what the exhibits are and why you've submitted them. So that is helpful. So then did he prepare this exhibit with both the survey markers and then the overlay on the aerial photography?
Yes.
Okay.
He was on the ground and with a drone with the newest technology.
Okay. And then let's go forward to exhibit Gonzalves 50. If Nicole, if you can put that up on the screen, that is, there's 4 pages of photos. And we'll go here to the first page and just one by one. Page 1 of Gonzalves 50. Who prepared this exhibit?
I did.
Okay. And what does it show? I assume the marker is one that Mr. Lowry put in? Yes,
Mr. Lowry surveyed it, entered the creek. That's my property at the stake. The survey map marker is number 317 as depicted on the aerial photo exhibit 49.
Okay. Let's go. And again, I just want to understand what these are. I'm just kind of helping you with your direct rebuttal testimony here, and then we'll go forward with Mr. Prager's cross-exam. So if Nicole, please go to page 2 of this exhibit, Gonzalves 50. And now, Mr. Gonzalves, tell us what this is and who prepared this.
Okay, so there was some question of metadata and how I took the pictures and things like that. This is in the creek. This is mostly at natural flow. Now, MID has a capability to raise and lower the water level. And what I was trying to capture here for you without you having seen it is the fact that the water is in our markers, in our points of contact, intersections with Canal Creek. And it changes from day to day. And if I tell them that you're going to come out and take a look at that, they'll alter the canal, they'll alter their flow, the natural flow. And so I took photos, and I'm trying to say here, I'll read the bottom, the survey map of property marker number 324 with a screenshot of my phone on metadata of where I was standing when I took the photo.
Okay. And now let's flip forward to page 3 of exhibit Gonzalves 50 and tell us what this is.
I was with Mr. Lowry, and we suited up in our construction gear and put on our boots to go into the water. And we were looking for those points that are all noted on map 49. And the points are actually in the water. This is Canal Creek early on in the season. The water wasn't flowing. It was standing still. I think we'll have to go back to the date. I can't recall, but it was this year.
Okay, so the thing I'm confused about is, and I have to take off my glasses to look at the picture, so bear with me. Where the legend says survey marker number 307 on survey map, but where is 307 in this photo?
If you go back to the aerial map on 49, it's a reference point. I'll show you.
No, I understand that, but I can't see the marker in the photo.
Oh, it's below my feet in the water.
Is it like right under your feet?
Yes, it's in the canal water.
Okay. So you actually can't see the marker on this photo then.
What's hard about this photo, and when I told you it was very, it's a very rough terrain. It's hard to get to. That elevation drop, my wife was taking a picture of me, I want to say probably 20 feet higher in elevation.
Okay,
So-
well, I just mainly wanted to know what it was, so that's helpful.
Yeah,
Let's go forward then to the last page of Exhibit Gonzalves 50, page 4, and tell us what this is.
okay. So I'll read the bottom first. It says elevation of the pipe installed by previous owners connecting Canal Creek to the flood easement pond. This Garmin is the first thing that we started with to duplicate Mr. Hess's survey. The Garmin is a decent device. It's inexpensive. It's only a couple $100. It shows the elevation of 192, I think, which is pretty accurate. It has a plus or minus accuracy of 10 feet. So it doesn't compare to the Trimble that we hired with Mr. Lowry. Trimble is a device that's used by civil engineers that bounces off 3, 4, or 5 satellites at any point in time, and they're super accurate today. So this is just a photo to tell you that we were trying to retrace the steps that Mr. Hess went on, and you can come and see that same point if you'd like.
Okay, and then let's go forward. Nicole, please put up Exhibit Gonzalves 51. And she'll make it a little bigger. One more enlargement probably would help. That's good. Excellent. Thank you. Mr. Gonzalves, what is this?
So this is a black and white exhibit of our property. If you recall, the lots 91, 92, 93, and 79, this is a depiction of where our property is, and it's duplicating, or in today's terms, having surveyed the actual boundaries in black and white.
So
And
who prepared this?
Casey Lowry, the civil engineer.
Okay. And this is based on his survey
Surveyor.
then?
Yeah, so those survey marks that start with 219 section corner in the upper right-hand corner, then 301 to 30, well, he went in a clockwise position from finding the corner sections of the northeast corner of the map. And most notably 301, 306, 307, 308. When you asked me what that photo was of me in the creek, there's the number 307.
Yeah, okay, I understand that. And one of the questions, frankly, I think Mr. Lowry will have to answer is, what was the underlying document that he used to determine what bearings to make, in distances and bearings when he was preparing this? I don't know if you know. Do you know what with the underlying document? He couldn't just have made up these numbers. They had to be based on some document.
Yeah, it's based on the recording from our county surveyor's office. It's called a surveyor's record of survey.
Okay, so this is showing the boundary of your property then?
Yeah, so he used my deeds of my property. And I can't explain to you exactly what they do, because they go to their datum, they called it, and these points are already historical. So for example, section corner 219.74 on the upper right-hand corner, he searched for it and found it. And those are the markers that have been there historically. And from that, then he delineates, I guess you'd call it, each point. They measure off each point to an accuracy level that's exact. So these are the beginning of a official document that's going to be recorded with the county
Okay.
surveyors.
Yeah, I
The-
think those are called records of survey. So that's
Yes.
fine. Okay, so I appreciate that. Let's just go forward to Exhibit Gonzalves 52. And this is the map that you sent me with your original exhibits. If I had it at the time we were numbering your original exhibits, it would have been the original numbering sequence, but we didn't get it until now. So we've scanned this. It'll take a minute to load, I'm sure, because it's a pretty big file. But there it is. This is the Yosemite Lake Quadrangle topograph. Oh no, excuse me. You wrote Yosemite Lake at the top, but it actually says Hopeton Quadrangle. So I'm not sure which it is, but anyway, it's clearly a U.S. Geological Survey topographic map, and it's dated. It says edition of 1916. So we've scanned that and turned it into a PDF file and posted it. So tell me what your purpose was for submitting this.
So my wife and I were doing research, and historically we had been told that Canal Creek didn't exist, and that's not true. So this is just a historical record back to, as far as we could find topographic maps, that Canal Creek is there. We'll have to zoom in on the upper section.
Yeah, maybe Nicole, just try to zoom in on the top half.
That's probably good right there, because if you get too close, I don't know if it distorts it.
Yeah, I see where sort of in the left of center, it says Canal Creek.
Yeah.
And then
so,
again, right of center, it says it again.
Yeah, so our area is called Amsterdam or Hopeton. I did not write Yosemite Lake on there. I purchased this from a historian. The historians like to hold on to these maps, and I don't know why he wrote Yosemite Lake on there. But what I was after was to show you that Canal Creek has always been there. Our property is off of this map. So when we did the research with Lane King, he had some questions of, did Canal Creek get built by MID? And it did not. It's a naturally occurring creek, and that was all this is trying to show, its origin from the eastern side down to where we are on the western side. There was another map that we tried to include that is closer to our property. So we were trying to give you a big picture.
Okay, so your property is located to the left of the left boundary on this map.
Correct.
If you're basically farther downstream on Canal Creek.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, that's helpful. And then the second page of this, I'm sure it appears to just be the backside, which just explains topographic maps. So I don't think we need to cover that.
I think what was in the backside there, Mr. Lilly, is the historical. It may actually talk about historical flows, naturally occurring creeks. That's why we.
Okay. All right. All right. So Nicole, just flip briefly to the backside. It's page 2, excuse me. If it'll let you.
Yeah, it's hard to read.
Oh, okay, that is pretty bad. So, and Mr. Prager obviously probably will have difficulty reading that. So if necessary, we can try to make arrangements. Our copy is pretty darn light also, but it's sort of legible, but we can make arrangements to make sure everybody has legible copies of that. So let's go forward with Exhibit Gonzalves 53. And as soon as she gets that up, I'll ask you to tell us why and again, this was also submitted in paper with your original exhibits. Fortunately, this one's a little more legible. So please tell us and maybe Nicole, you can kind of zoom in on the top half of this one as well. And tell us why you've submitted this.
So we were showing on our properties.
Well, this one shows our property.
Because
and-
there was a question Lynn King had of if the creek continued on, because on a map he had, it didn't continue on. And we were just
So
saying,
my wife and I are talking, and what we were trying to show you is our original patent dates that we were researching with Lang Kang. And we're showing you that from the previous map to this map, Canal Creek existed prior to 1914, prior to MID utilizing it as a channel, so to speak. And they blocked it off, which I mentioned in my previous testimony about the dams that were installed and diverted water, natural water. And so this, if you zoom in, our property is in section our section township range is in there. Oh, it's to the left. You see township 5 south, range 13 east. It's actually the left side of number 8. Section 8 is, you're close there where your cursor is. Go straight to the right, a little bit more.
Yeah, right there. Bingo.
There.
Can you
That's
enlarge
fine.
that, Nicole? Maybe just enlarge it a couple more times. Okay, so is that the bend where your property is?
Yes, that whole eastern portion of 8 covers our 3 lots that we own.
Okay,
And
I
that-
certainly recognize that configuration of the creek. That translates or is the same in the more recent maps.
Right.
So,
So
okay,
what we-
well, this map is dated 1885, so it's actually a little earlier than Exhibit Gonzalves 52.
yes, thank you.
Okay, all right, well, that's very helpful. And then finally, just this morning, or I think you submitted it last night by email to the hearings office with a CC to Mr. Prager, and I downloaded it this morning. Nicole, please go to Exhibit Gonzalves 54, page 1, which I just labeled and posted this morning. It's the same file that was attached to your email. I just wanted to give it an exhibit number so it was clear for the record. And yes, so, and please tell us what this is.
So in the hour of lunchtime, you told us you wanted to see 17 to 19, 2017 to 2019, our use of what they renamed our pump at the creek. They called it LI 956, which was previously off of a different pump on the northern side as ES 634 and ES 650. Now, this solidifies our proof that we only used one pump. We only ran the same numbers, the same meters, and it was recognized and solidifies the fact that we truly pumped what we pumped. Mr. Coates had said I had changed pumps out in different meters, and I couldn't prove that I used the same pump. This was all the same pump, and this is our usage. We only used a total of 8.5 acre feet at the end of 2017, which we were overbilled for anyways. 2018, we used 46.06 acre feet. 2019, we used 33.76 acre feet.
Okay, so Mr. Gonzalez, first, I have a couple of questions. First of all, did you pump water from the pond in 2017 before September? In other words, before the entries that are shown here during the earlier part of 2017?
Yes, we were already in litigation with Merced Irrigation District, and they had already fined me the $205,000.
Okay,
And
so that's true, but that would be through that would be on some other records, not on these. So then my next question is, did Merced Irrigation District install and read the meter that produced these numbers?
I had a licensed contractor install the meter, and it was also the same meter that's on my pump.
Okay, did
They
Merced
read 'em,
Irrigation
yes.
District ever review it to confirm that they agreed that the meter was accurate?
Yes. It's a
Okay.
micrometer mag meter, they call them. It's electromagnetic water flow. It's the best technology we have for agricultural right now.
Okay, so is there any dispute between you and Merced Irrigation District? And I'm just going to focus on 2018 and 2019. Do they agree that these are the correct numbers for the amounts of water you pumped from the pond during these months?
Yes, if you look at the next pages, this is just a summary off of their billing.
Okay, yeah,
Yes.
we don't need to flip through. I did see them this morning. I just want to make sure we're clear on that. So, and then the other question I have, during 2018 and 2019, did you use water from any other source, like a well or something else, or from a Merced Irrigation District lateral or any other source besides the water that went through this meter to irrigate your 29 acres of almond orchards in 2018 and 2019?
No, it's still the same setup.
So no other water sources were used to irrigate those acres in those years?
No, sir.
Okay, I mean, I'm sorry, that became a double negative. So that was my fault. I'm going to just say it one more time and please bear with me. Did you use any other source of water besides the water that you pumped from this pond to irrigate the almond orchards in 2018 or 2019?
No, I did not.
Okay, thank you. That is clarified and is helpful. I am curious. I'm not a farmer, but I certainly have spent a lot of time reviewing evidence. For 29 acres, these numbers do seem pretty darn low. I mean, in 2019, that's just a little over 1 acre foot per acre. And in 2018, it's about, I can't do the math in my head, but it's a little less than 1.5 acre feet per acre. That does seem very low for almonds. Can you explain why those numbers are what they are?
Well, first of all, I'll have to say I'm blessed with that property. It's very unique. There's not another piece of property like it in the state of California. It's groundwater and its soil type, you'll just have to see. And I woke up with dreams and nightmares of trying to explain this to you, because when I invited you to the property to see it, I really was simply asking you to see it in its natural state without 14 or 15 engineers coming from MBK or from people to come and overlay new data to try to say they have a theory.
Don't get into arguments. Just tell me why your water use is so low.
That's just what I used.
Okay, well, that's all right.
We're blessed.
If that's what it is. And did you have full production in 2018 and 2019?
No, we've lost production significantly.
Okay, but is that because of lack of water, or is that just because of the long-term effects?
Yeah, it's lack of water.
But lack of water in 2018 or 2019, or is it just the result of lack of water in prior years?
It's a result of damage from the trees from 2015 on.
All right. Okay, so thank you. I just want to check my notes here. Okay, so I think, Mr. Gonzalves, frankly, that's pretty clear. I think we've saved you having to try to summarize as you go. And I understand, this has been a difficult process for you, but I will treat that as your direct testimony for rebuttal. And unless there's something that you think I've really missed here, I'm going to go forward with allowing Mr. Prager to ask you questions. But is there anything else in summarizing these exhibits that you think you need to add now?
Well, Mr. Lilly, I got to admit that I've been under an immense amount of pressure. My trees have suffered, and I don't know how to explain that to you. I did get kind of rushed on the other items, and I feel like I may be forgetting something because I don't have a whole prosecution team. I don't have a defense team to help me catch what I should have caught. I hope you can see that. I hope you see it. I may be missing something. And
I appreciate the circumstances you are operating under. And frankly, I think you've done a pretty darn good job considering you don't have legal training. Obviously, you have tremendous experience in agriculture, but I where I have thought things were missing, I've asked questions like the ones I just asked about your 2018 and 2019 water use. So I'm not aware of anything that's missing. We will have to talk about Mr. Lowry. I'm sure Mr. Prager is going to raise that issue. So we'll circle back to that. But with that, I think you have covered your points very well. And I'm going to go forward now. And Mr. Prager, do you have cross-examination questions that you would like to ask Mr. Gonzalves about his exhibits, Gonzalves 40 through 54?
Yes, Mr. Lilly, I do.
Okay,
I also
please go ahead. Excuse me, go ahead.
I also have a fair amount of objections to the admissibility of a number of the rebuttal exhibits. I just want to highlight that so that we make sure to handle that after this cross-examination round.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, I will ask you if you have objections. I would have been surprised if you did not. So please go ahead with your cross-examination, and then we will talk about it. There may be redirect or additional statements, but go ahead with your cross-ex, and then we'll get to exhibits next.
Okay, so my first set of questions, Mr. Gonzalves, is about Rebuttal Exhibit 43.
Okay, so, we'll put that up on the screen, please. I'm sure you want us to. Nicole, please put up Exhibit 43. Excuse me, I didn't want to interrupt Mr. Prager, but I knew you'd want it up there. That
was exactly what I was going to say. You read my mind.
That was obvious. So we'll get 43 up, at least the first page of it, and please go ahead.
Mr. Gonzalves, did you testify? Let me start again. You testified that in the beginning of the summer, or let's say in the middle of the summer of 2015, you had no other source of water except for the water in the reservoir, correct?
I testified that my water source through lateral 7 had been cut off. That's correct.
Well, you also testified that you had no other source of water other than the water in the pond in 2015, correct?
Correct.
In the summer of 2015, if you hadn't started irrigating with water from the pond, your almond trees probably wouldn't have been able to produce many nuts, would they?
The nuts are produced in the springtime. They already were set. You talking about 15 or 16?
The summer of 2015. If you had no other source of water, if you hadn't pulled water from the pond, let me narrow it. Your almond harvest wouldn't have been very large if you hadn't irrigated at all, correct?
Well, if you don't irrigate at all, the trees begin to shrivel and dry. The nuts were already formed. They're made by then. They're carried on to harvest, and then you're developing bud set for the next year. And that, if you're trying to understand what Mr. Lilly was talking about earlier, is it does diminish future crops.
Okay. But you did start pulling water from the pond in 2015. And you did get an almond crop, correct?
I already had the almond crop on there, and I did finish the almond crop, and I got water in August.
Okay. When did you finish the almond crop? Like
Harvest starts in August.
When is harvest time?
You typically around August 18th or the end of September. There's 3 varieties down there, and we harvest them 3 different times.
Okay. Without any water from the pond in 2015, would your trees have died?
Not necessarily. They get dieback. The limbs start to die back,
Okay.
and then the future crops are damaged.
Okay. So the future crops. Um, I've been asking you questions kind of specifically about 2015. And you've testified that this would harm future crops. So if you hadn't had cold water in 2015 and in the spring and early summer of 2016, you wouldn't have gotten much of a crop in 2016 either, right? You would have had some serious dieback and a pretty substantial crop loss.
I had significant dieback, and the crop total pounds are on the total pounds of almonds for 2014 to 2018. There's a summary there for you.
Yeah. Okay.
We lost a significant amount of tonnage, yes.
So even with the water that you diverted, you lost a significant amount of tonnage. Is that, I'm just clarifying what you said. I'm trying to make sure that that's what you said, right?
Our tonnage from 2014 was 51,399, and 2015 was 25,000, and 2016 was 39,000.
Right. Okay. So you did have a reduction in crop size, and I feel like we've established that you, even with the water that you did pull from the pond, you had a significant reduction. If you hadn't pulled any water from the pond at all, and I recognize that this is a hypothetical, but I feel like it's a pretty basic one that we can all kind of, even a non-farmer like myself can follow. If you hadn't pulled any water from the pond, it's likely that your crop in 2016 and 2017 would have been little to none, right?
Oh, I see where you're going. You're trying to take me back to this hypothetical farm that you want to develop.
No,
I can tell you.
Okay.
from-
One,
Excuse me, Mr.
please just
Gonzalves.
answer the question.
Excuse me, Mr. Prager. Let me just explain how this works. Mr. Gonzalves, Mr. Prager is allowed to ask hypothetical questions of witnesses with specialized knowledge in the area of the question. And you clearly have specialized knowledge in the area of questions of almond production on your property. So he is allowed to ask the hypothetical question of, what do you think your production would have been if there had been less water than you actually did apply in 2015, 2016, and 2017? So this isn't diabolical or evil. This is something the rules of evidence allow him to do, and he's doing that. So I just wanted to explain that. And Mr. Prager, maybe with that explanation now, that will help Mr. Gonzalves kind of focus on what you're asking. Maybe you can kind of parse your question up into parts. I think you were already sort of splitting it up by year, but I think that will help. But if you want
really
to
only
proceed,
have
ask
one or
your
two
hypothetical question
specific.
about years, and Mr. Gonzalves, that is something it's appropriate for you to answer.
So
Okay, Mr. Lilly, I understand.
Wait, but let him ask a question first.
well,
We're-
if there's an
we've-
existing
you're
question
a little
that's open
confused,
and
so
Mr. Gonzalez is
I want to let
refused-
Mr. Prager ask a new question.
Okay, so to get that on the record, there's an existing question open that Mr. Gonzalez has refused to answer. So
Well-
I will just reiterate that.
That's not
same
true.
question.
I'll answer.
Wait,
Yes or no, and I will
wait.
expect Mr. Gonzalez to answer
Stop,
it.
both of you stop. Let's not argue. Let's just re-ask the question, Mr. Prager. Please just re-ask the question, and Mr. Gonzalez, please just answer the question.
Considering what we just talked about regarding reduction of crop production due to the reduction in water, if you hadn't pulled any water from the reservoir in 2015, 2016, or 2017, you would likely have little to no almond crop, correct?
No, that's inaccurate. I've actually grown trees with no water.
You have grown, okay. My question wasn't about whether or not you've grown trees with no water. My question was about your almond crop.
Oh,
So
I've
that is
grown almond
again,
crops with
not
no
the
water.
not the question that I asked. Please answer the question that I asked. I can wait.
Throw a
I'm
better,
waiting for your answer.
Will still be grown.
Okay, so you
And I've
contend.
grown 700 pounds to 1,200 pounds per acre on trees with no water.
Okay,
That's what you're
so
asking.
if you can grow, Mr. Lilly, let me ask this next question. If you can grow an almond crop with no water whatsoever, why do you irrigate almond orchards at all?
Because it's not financially profitable.
Okay,
You get
so
a bigger
that's my question. My question wasn't, could it ever happen? It's, you would likely have little almond crop harvest with no water, correct?
Your definition of little is vague and ambiguous. So to answer your question is, you would have less of a crop.
Would you have less of a crop than you already did?
Probably.
Mr. Lilly, can you zoom in on this exhibit, please?
Yes, which part?
The bottom section that begins with total pounds in 2015.
Okay,
There's some calculations there.
there, is that legible now?
Yeah. Mr. Gonzalves, you testified that the total income, I'm sorry, let's just start from the top of this little column of calculations. It reads total pounds in 2015, 2016, and 2017. And then it says 95,670 or 657. Is that correct?
Yes, that's what's written.
Okay. And the next line down says total income 95,657 times 2.5 pounds or 2.5 per pound equals $239,142, correct?
That's what we wrote, yes.
Okay. So my next question to clarify this is kind of tying some of our previous questions together. You did divert water from the pond, and it was your only source of water. And during those years, you generated 95,000 pounds of almonds, which resulted in $239,000 of income, correct?
That's what we were trying to tell you.
So
Is that a
Mr.
yes?
Gonzalez, I think you can just
Is that a
say yes
yes?
or no.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Mr. Gonzalez, you testified that in the spring of 2020, you completed a new irrigation system from an MID lateral that cost you $45,000, roughly $45,514, correct?
Yes.
Did you provide any documentation to back up that particular number?
No, but I can.
My question is it provided in evidence today?
I forgot and got something.
Yeah, like I said, here it is right here in front of me if
Mr.
you'd like me to
Gonzalves,
see
my
it.
question is it provided in evidence today?
No, and I want to tell you something
Thank you.
else, but I'll just say no.
Mr. Lilly, can you pull up Exhibit 49, please?
Yes, we will get Exhibit 49, Gonzalves 49. And let us know, I assume, you want us to zoom in on the right side of that? Or let us know,
No,
Mr. Prager, if you want us to zoom in or not.
How many pages are in Exhibit 49?
This is it, it's one page.
My apologies. I guess I was actually looking for Exhibit 50.
Okay,
Sorry.
50 is the 4 pages of photos. Do you want us to put up 50?
Yes, please.
All right, Nicole, please put up Exhibit Gonzalves 50, page 1.
You know what, Mr. Lilly? Just as a point of order, I do actually have questions about 49. My notes are just a little scrambled, so we will go back to 49 after this. I just
Yeah,
apologize.
that's fine. We don't have to do them in numerical order. So why don't you do your questions about 50 while it's up, and then you can go back to 49.
All right, fair enough. Can you scroll down? I think it's the last picture.
Okay, we'll go to page 4 of
Yeah,
Exhibit
that's
Gonzalves 50.
Mr. Gonzalves, you testified recently in response to a question from Mr. Lilly that this device reads what, 192 as an elevation, and that you purport that that's a picture of the pipe, correct?
That's what I said.
Did you also just testify that this Garmin device has an error of plus or minus 10 feet?
You know, if you want me to give you the manual, it has an error written in the manual.
Well, the manual wasn't submitted into evidence. So what I'm asking
Okay.
you is to clarify what you said to Mr. Lilly.
Well, if you want to rewind the recording, I'm not exactly sure what I said, but yeah, it has an error of
Okay,
several feet.
thank you. Okay, Mr. Lilly, now I think I need to go back to 49.
All right, we'll go back to Exhibit Gonzalves 49. And let us know if you want us to zoom in on any part of it.
Mr. Lilly, I think that you testified, I'm sorry, Mr. Lilly, Mr. Gonzalves. I think you testified when you were speaking with Mr. Lilly that this was generated by not you, correct?
I hired a licensed surveyor.
Right, right. Somebody named Lowry, correct?
Correct.
And I think you testified that it's not complete. And I didn't quite hear you. I just wanted to make sure that I heard you correctly, that this survey that Mr. Lowry has done is not complete.
There's a process to completing a survey. For a record of survey, it needs to be recorded with the
Okay.
county.
And it's not recorded.
We haven't had a time to record it yet.
And I believe you said that it was the start of a survey, not necessarily a complete survey.
That's correct. We needed more time to finish the survey.
Okay. Okay, so you just said you needed more time to finish the survey. So the survey is unfinished.
Correct. It's not recorded yet.
Okay. And Mr. Lowry hasn't signed it, correct?
That's correct.
He didn't sign it because it's not finished. And he didn't provide his stamp either, correct?
His stamp number is on the pins that he set and that he found. And if you'd like to interview him, I guess we can set that up, Mr. Lilly.
Well, Mr. Lowry isn't here today. So my questions are about the documents that you've submitted in evidence today. So I can't ask Mr. Lowry because he's not here.
Correct. We couldn't ask MBK because they weren't there either. Correct.
Yeah, absolutely. Mr. Lilly, I think that's it.
Why don't you take a minute and review your notes and
Yeah, give me just 30 seconds to think about this. No, you know what? I'm done. That's it.
all right. So Nicole, could you please put up Gonzalves 43 again, please, again? I just had a follow-up question, 2 questions. And that's fine, just leave it, that's just the enlargement. Oops. The zoom in was fine. If you can just go back and zoom in on that last, the part on the bottom. And that's fine, we can read it. So Mr. Gonzalves, you've testified, and your written testimony here shows the number of pounds of almonds produced on these 29 acres during 2014 through 2017. How many pounds of almonds were produced by these same orchards in 2018?
We can go get the records. My wife.
Okay, is that something you can check if we get during a break, like a 15 or 30-minute break?
Yeah, she's headed that way to go get it for you right now.
Okay, I would just, I mean, it's very helpful to get the whole context. So I'd like to get the numbers for 2018 and 2019. I assume you don't have the numbers for 2020 yet, but if we'll take a break at the appropriate time and you can come back and get those just to round out the picture. And that's the only question I have. And so Mr. Prager, you don't need to recross now. If he testifies about those numbers and you have a follow-up question, then you can do that after he's done that. We'll do it after the break.
I'm not entirely sure whether or not it's appropriate to object, but Mr. Gonzalves hasn't submitted any records regarding what his crop production was in 2018. There's no testimony, and I would submit that the inclusion of new records about new crop production outside of the violation time period is both surprise testimony and irrelevant.
Okay, well, I'll certainly overrule
I'm
that
not entirely
objection.
sure that it's
Okay, I'm going to overrule that objection. I think it's appropriate for me to ask those additional years for context so we have the whole picture, particularly because, as you pointed out in your cross-examination question, there could be some lingering, and he pointed out in his testimony, there could be lingering effects on yield in subsequent years. So I'm going to allow him to answer the questions, but then if you have follow-up questions, you can do that. But we'll do that after a break. We'll circle back. And Mr. Gonzalves, I don't know if I want you to have enough time to review the records, but I'm going to just ask two questions. What were the number of pounds in 2018 and what were the number of pounds in 2019? Do you have the numbers now?
Yeah, my wife just grabbed 18 for the creek specifically. We get a report that has our other properties on it.
Yeah.
So if you want me to submit it, I'm going to redact the other properties and my account numbers. But
Yeah. Okay, what we want, and let me tell you what we want, and then I'd rather you take a break and get it right than rush through it. But what I want is the number of pounds produced of almonds produced in 2018 and 2019 by these same 29 acres. So it's basically by the same acres that produce the numbers that are shown here on this exhibit, Gonzalves 43 for 2014 through 2017. Is that clear?
Yes, I can tell you 18 right now.
Okay, why don't you just tell us 18 right now?
18 was 18,952 pounds.
18,952. Okay, and you're going to get 2019.
Yeah, she's still looking for that.
Okay, and that's fine. And as I say, we can take a break if necessary. So with that, the next thing on our script here is, I assume, Mr. Gonzalves, you would like to offer into evidence exhibits Gonzalves 40 through 54. Is that correct?
Yes, please.
All right. And Mr. Prager, do you have any objections to exhibits Gonzalves 40 through Gonzalves 54?
Yes, I do.
Okay, please tell us your objections.
Okay. I'm going to start with exhibit 43, which we didn't discuss at all today. No, I'm sorry, not 43. I was looking at the wrong piece of paper. 45, which we didn't discuss really at all today. It's what appears to be a description of a phone call. My first objection is that it's not actually rebuttal testimony, in that it doesn't rebut what it claims to rebut. No portion of the exhibit rebuts the facts that were in evidence. I'm sorry. Do you want me to?
I want you to state all your objections to all of the exhibits, and then we'll go
okay.
forward.
You don't want to go. Okay, we'll go through them all. So that was 45. 49, which is the survey, the half-finished, incomplete, unstamped survey, is not admissible because it can't be authenticated. There's nobody here that can testify that it is what it purports to be. 50 is the same thing. It can't be authenticated, particularly the image of the stake in the ground cannot be authenticated. Mr. Gonzalves claims it's one thing, but he claims that it was put there by somebody else who isn't available for cross-examination. He hasn't presented any testimony on it. Also, I think it's it might be the third picture in 50. I think it's a picture of somebody standing in a creek. Mr. Gonzalves claims that there's a stake there. Mr. Lilly, you were able to elicit testimony that shows that there's no stake in the picture, it can't be properly authenticated. So that covers 49, 50. I think I have the exact same objections on 51 as well. These are all the 49, 50, and 51 are all this referencing this half-formed, unfinished survey. And I think almost all of it can't properly be authenticated because it's not signed, stamped, or recorded, and Mr. Lowry isn't here to testify to it. 52 is not rebuttal testimony. It's not.
And just to clarify on 52, he submitted that with his original exhibits, as I said before. So it was just because of the large size, he wasn't able to scan it and get it to you.
Oh,
It's
okay.
just the
That's
numbering
actually
system.
in chief.
It was part of his case in chief, yes. So, I mean, you may have other objections, but I'm not going to allow the objection that that's a rebuttal. That's just because it took us some time to scan it and number it and post it.
Fair enough. Is 53 the same?
Yes.
Okay.
Those both came in paper when he submitted his original exhibits.
Okay. So, you know what? Beyond that, I'm just going to let that go.
Okay.
Going back 49, 50, and 51, I lodged authentication issues. I'd also like to lodge objections on the grounds that they're hearsay. Sorry, that was a little retconning because of my notes. And on 54, which is a series of documents that were submitted last night, they are not rebuttal testimony. The prosecution team did not testify in its case in chief regarding diversion of water from the pond in 2018 and 2019. That's outside the violation period. I think it also constitutes surprise testimony in that it came in literally last night and my staff have not had any opportunity to review it whatsoever. Moreover, the summary, I can't tell if that's been authenticated at all. I have no idea where the summary numbers have come from. And Mr. Gonzalves purports that they're figures that he drew up last night and they're based on MID records. And I have no idea whether or not that's correct. On 54, I'd also like to point out that on the objection that I'd like to lodge an objection that it's irrelevant to these proceedings entirely because it's outside the violation period and not in discussion in the prosecution's case in chief at all. And lastly, in terms of allowing these kinds of exhibits, I lodged an objection to this exhibit in particular yesterday during the hearing. I thought it was prejudicial that you would allow Mr. Gonzalves to provide new documents, and you clarified your request to Mr. Gonzalves that you were only asking for a few numbers if he could remember or if he could refresh his recollection. And I said that that was fine. And so I suppose my objection to that is it's outside the scope of what you've already allowed for that particular kind of testimony. And that's it.
Okay. So
Mr.
thank you, Mr. Prager. So here are my rulings on your objections. I overrule your objections on the basis that Exhibit 45, Gonzalves 45 and 54 are not rebuttal. I think regarding Exhibit 45, it's clear that the prosecution team's evidence did talk about conversations with Mr. Olson, either conversations or emails with Mr. Olson. So I think it's appropriate for Mr. Gonzalves
Lilly,
to talk about his. Excuse me, go ahead.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. I recognize that I was given a fair amount of time to speak. But I was nuts. I was speaking particularly generally about the fact that it's not rebuttal testimony, and I didn't go into further explanation about why I think it's not rebuttal testimony. It appears that you are overruling it on that basis of that kind of general objection. And I realize now that I should have been more specific when I made that objection.
You also said at the time you didn't think it was rebuttal to Exhibit PT 17, which is what it says at the top it is. So
yeah, but
I would say you had both you raised that specific objection, but perhaps you're also raising a general objection. Do you have more to say on Exhibit 45?
I think I have clarification.
Okay.
PT 17 specifically states that Mr. Olson conveyed to Mr. Hess that the reservoir is not within the O&M manual. That is the prosecution team's contention. The prosecution team has never contended that the property itself is not within the manual. In fact, that's within the prosecution team's case in chief. Yes, the property is within the O&M manual. PT 17 says Randy Olson was not able to confirm that the reservoir is within the O&M manual. Now, Exhibit 45 does not rebut that argument. It's a relatively nuanced argument, but I think it's important. PT 45 does not rebut, Gonzalves 45 does not rebut PT 17.
All right, I've heard your objections, and I overrule those objections. I think the prosecution team has opened the door enough with the discussion of Mr. Olson and the Army Corps of Engineers that this is permissible within the scope of that of the issue of the Corps of Engineers activities and authorities here. So I overrule the objection on the grounds that it's not within the scope of proper rebuttal. As far as Exhibit 54 goes, I overrule the objections that that's not proper rebuttal. The prosecution team, I forget whether it was Mr. Hess or Mr. Coates, but one of the prosecution team witnesses did talk about the almond crop or the water usage in prior years before 2014 as what I'll call a baseline or a reference period. So I think it's perfectly appropriate. And I actually asked the question about 2018 and 2019 because it seems like we want to get the comparison both before, if the prosecution team had evidence from before 2014 through 2017, certainly the evidence for water usage amounts since then, I think is also relevant and appropriate. And that's why I asked for it. As far as the scope, you are correct, Mr. Prager. I just asked for two numbers, but frankly, I think it's in my interest and your interest to have the detailed records, detailed billing statements that Mr. Gonzalves has submitted from Merced Irrigation District. So you can check, you can have your staff check. He testified that the first page is the summary he prepared using those billings. And you certainly can check and address it in your closing brief. if you think his summaries are inaccurate. But I think this is appropriate rebuttal testimony, or even if not rebuttal, testimony that the hearing officer has asked for. So I overrule that objection. I do have much greater concerns, and Mr. Prager, I think you raise a very valid point regarding exhibits Gonzalves 49, 50, and 51, on the basis that Mr. Lowry has, there basically are two problems with these three exhibits. Number one, they certainly contain hearsay. They have statements that Mr. Lowry has made, and he's not here to testify, and Mr. Prager cannot cross-examine him. And number two, it's an incomplete survey, and he hasn't completed his record of survey, signed it, stamped it, and recorded it. So those are both valid objections. However, that doesn't end the question. I don't want to just eliminate them because they're directly on point for one of the key questions in this case, which is whether or not the parcel, Mr. Gonzalves' parcel, contains or borders any part of Canal Creek. So I'm in a bit of a quandary here. I do have discretion. I don't have to end the hearing today. And of course, what I want, this isn't like a sports contest where when the buzzer ends, it's all over. This is a quest to determine the truth based on evidence, and it's very different. And I am in a quandary. I don't want this to just drag on forever, but on the other hand, I sure would like to have a complete record of survey because I think that would really round out the testimony here. So, Mr. Gonzalves, I'm going to just ask you first, if I give you 30 days and say, you have 30 days and you don't have 1 day more to get Mr. Coates to complete his record of survey and record it and for you to submit that, can you do that?
Yes, sir. I will try. His name is Mr. Casey Lowry. You said Mr. Coates. I think you meant Casey Lowry.
Excuse me, I certainly did mean Casey Lowry, and I'm checking my garbled notes, so please, thank you.
Okay.
But yes.
I'm almost in tears and I'm thankful.
Okay,
I will
well,
do my best to get that done.
All right, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to close the record today. I want the truth here. I don't want to give one side or the other side benefits. And I know, Mr. Prager, you're going to say that Mr. Gonzalves has had a lot of time to get this survey done, which is true. That the report of investigation, I forget when it was, but it's been well over a year. But it is what it is. That's my concern, is getting to the truth and getting an accurate survey information here. So,
Mr. Lilly, may I add something on that?
Briefly.
MBK surveyed my property and they refused to give me the surveys. They were surprised, and
yeah,
we had them.
Let's not. You've pointed that out before. I don't want to get into that. I just want to wrap this up.
Yes, sir.
My understanding is MBK worked for Merced Irrigation District, and they had no legal obligation to provide that survey to you, and you therefore hired your own surveyor, which was fine. So yeah, let's just leave it at that. Okay. But it's 30 days from today. This will be in part of our order to submit that. And then if necessary, certainly Mr. Prager will have a right, and I'll just tell you this right now, Mr. Gonzalves, but he will have a right to require Mr. Lowry to testify and for him to cross-examine that. That's his absolute right under due process. So we're going to have to do that. We will see. Once we get the record of survey, I will probably hold a status conference, and Mr. Prager can tell us whether or not he wants to require Mr. Lowry to testify. But he certainly has that absolute right to do that, because otherwise this is hearsay. It's not admissible. This is not supplementing something else in any way that I could consider it to make a finding under Government Code Section 11513. So that's my plan on that. And I think I've covered all your objections, Mr. Prager. Are there any objections you made that I have not covered?
No, but I would like to lodge a new objection.
All right, go ahead.
I would like to object to the opportunity for Mr. Gonzalves to provide new evidence. I think it's highly unusual to allow a party to submit half-formed hearsay evidence and then, in an effort to help that party, provide 30 days to continue to develop new evidence. I would also like to object on the basis that property boundaries of Mr. Gonzalves' property is a tertiary point in prosecution team's argument. It is not necessarily, as you characterized it, a key part of this hearing. Prosecution team's testimony is that regardless of whether or not the property was riparian at the time of patent, it is highly likely that the Crocker-Huffman deed severed contiguity, and no extrinsic evidence outside of that deed shows that riparian rights were retained. Furthermore, whether or not Mr. Gonzalves' property has one point on a survey that connects to Canal Creek is not a key issue in this hearing, because Mr. Gonzalves' use of water is far outside the bounds of a riparian right. I think that this is a highly unusual action, and I think it should only be taken in extraordinary circumstances when a key issue cannot be resolved based on the evidence that has been presented. My objection is this is not a key issue.
All right. Your objections are noted and overruled. First of all, whether or not I disagree with your argument that keeping the record open to allow additional evidence is unusual. I think that's actually fairly common in both water board proceedings and other administrative proceedings. Whether or not this is a key point is certainly something that you can address in your closing brief, and I'm sure you will. I understand your argument that the Crocker-Huffman, I don't know whether it was a deed or an agreement, I think it was actually an agreement, severed riparian rights is a separate legal argument. And I will note that the prosecution team has offered some evidence on that, but no survey as to there's a 150-foot wide strip for which the severance occurred. And there's some overlay maps, which we will decide that certainly is some evidence, but it's not a record, a survey of showing where that 150-foot wide strip of land is on the land, is on the creek. So anyway, your second objection goes to the weight of the evidence, not its admissibility, and certainly you can make those arguments in your closing brief. So it's overruled on that basis. So with that, I will admit into evidence exhibits Gonzalves 40 through 48 and 52 through 54. I will reserve ruling on exhibits 49, 50, and 51, Gonzalves 49, 50, and 51, pending the submission of the Lowry record of survey and potentially an additional I won't say day, but additional several hours of hearing if necessary. So that completes that. I think that completes all of the evidence. Is there any other evidence. I think we've been through direct cases and then prosecution team rebuttal and Gonzalves rebuttal. I haven't seen any other evidence. Mr. Prager, is there any other evidence that you believe that you want to submit at this time?
I'm sorry, can you clarify your question?
Well, sometimes, you know, I just want to make sure we've closed the loop. We did have rebuttal to Mr. Gonzalves' rebuttal, and in theory, you could rebut that, but I don't think there's anything further. I just wanted to ask you.
No, the prosecution team does not have rebuttal to Gonzalves' rebuttal.
Okay. And Mr. Gonzalves, I've made the ruling regarding Mr. Lowry, and I believe that completes your rebuttal as well. So other than the Lowry issue, I think we're done with evidence. I do want to talk about next, I mentioned this yesterday, and that is whether or not to do a site visit. I mentioned yesterday that I was very interested in doing a site visit, and I'll tell you what I'm contemplating. It would probably be, well, it'd be me and a few members of my staff to go on site just so we can see the lay of the land. The maps and the photos are pretty good, but there's no substitute for seeing something in real life. I know the water board sometimes does this and sometimes does not, depending on the case. Certainly the plan is not to allow any testimony, but simply to allow people to point out where things are. I would hope, obviously Mr. Gonzalves will be there. I hope Mr. Hess can be there. Obviously Mr. Prager will be there. To just point out, you know, here is what, you know, here is the pipe, or here is the levee, here is the pond. And that's about it. We will bring a video camera, so it'll be recorded audio and video and will become part of the record, but that will be it. We will observe all COVID-19 protocols, of course, as far as masks and social distancing. But that is my plan or my proposal. I know Mr. Gonzalves, you said you support that. And I know Mr. Prager, you said at the end of near the end of the day yesterday that you oppose that. So could you please tell me what your concerns are about a site visit, or whether you still oppose that?
Yes, Mr. Lilly, the prosecution team still opposes it. But I think I need clarification. On exactly what the purpose of the site visit is. And I heard you just now say that you and your staff wanted to see the lay of the land, but you wouldn't be allowing any new testimony. So I guess my question is, what's the value of a site visit?
Okay. And just to clarify, that is what I said, see the lay of the land and the facilities, and no testimony beyond simply identifying the facilities that are in the field. And that is the purpose. As I said before, there is just no substitute for seeing something in real life, but it's simply for that purpose.
So you wouldn't be generating any new facts?
Well,
correct?
I'm sure the order will refer to the fact that we have gone out. If we do a site visit, the order will say that we have done a site visit.
Okay, so how do you plan to use the observations that you will be making?
Well, I think, I don't know for sure. I'm sorry, I can't tell you that. It is possible that the proposed order will say that the hearing officer saw this. I think that is
okay. That sounds like the hearing officer will be acting in some respect as a fact finder, and I find that to be highly unusual.
I am, wait a minute, let me just back, excuse me, Mr. Prager. That's what hearing officers do, is find facts. That's not unusual. That's the first half of our orders are findings of fact.
Let me rephrase that. It sounds like you will be an independent fact finder. And I'm pretty sure the water boards have never allowed and independent fact finder to do this. Like this is an unprecedented proposal. And I think,
and just so we're clear on that, Mr. Prager, that is incorrect. I know from my prior experience when I was an attorney representing parties before the water board and water right hearings, I can think of two, and there probably were more times where the hearing officer and water board staff did a site visit with the parties of the relevant facilities. I don't know, either before or after the hearing, but before they issued their decision. So this is not unusual.
And they used, right, but did they, that may or may not have occurred. I don't know.
It did.
And my question to you is, because I don't know the facts, did those board members and staff use their observations in the creation of the order?
Okay, well, as far as what will go into the order, I don't remember what they did, and I can't say what we are going to do here. But
okay,
if you think, wait, let me finish. If you think when the proposed order is issued, if you think there's something inappropriate in it as far as findings based on the site visit, you may raise those objections. But I don't think there's an inherent problem with our doing a site visit.
I recognize that. I still have concerns, and I would like. I think, okay, so this is an issue of first impression for us. I don't entirely understand the true, or maybe, or the planned use of the observations or the legal authority. And if I could request that the prosecution team have an opportunity to provide briefing on this matter prior to your decision, that would be greatly appreciated.
So your concern is not on the site visit itself. Your concern is on the use of the observations from the site visit.
Well, I haven't, I do have logistical issues with the site visit, but yes, I mean, you know, to be clear, if you could tell me you were going to do a site visit, but you weren't going to use any of those observations or any of the facts that you glean as a percipient a party in your order, I wouldn't have a problem with it. But you can't tell me if you're going to be using your observations or not. So
I can tell you we will use our observations, at least as we were preparing the proposed order.
Okay,
Otherwise, there would be no point to do it.
So yes, I have concerns with the legality of having somebody who's supposed to be a neutral fact determiner become a new independent investigator. And I'm not entirely sure, like I'm not, this is an issue of legal first impression for me. And my request is that I have an opportunity to provide briefing on this particular issue. So that's my legal concerns.
And let me just tell you how we will address those. The date for filing closing briefs will be after the date of the site visit. Probably not much, because I don't think this is a very big part of what needs to be in the briefs. But obviously we need time for Mr. Lowry as well. So you certainly can raise these issues in your closing brief. I suggest, though, that you do some research not only on administrative processes and what the water board has done, but there's a whole body of law on courts taking what they call views and juries taking views of sites. And I know I have done that in court proceedings where we spent a whole day with the judge and the court reporter touring a creek. So this is not something unusual, but you can certainly raise in your closing brief the issue of what is appropriate for the hearing officer to use from the information obtained during the site visit and what is not appropriate. That certainly is something you can address in your brief. So with that, please go ahead and tell me your logistical concerns.
The logistical concerns surround the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm unprepared today to tell you whether or not water board staff can or will be able to conduct a site visit. My understanding of the Division of Water Rights staff is that they are particularly limited in what field work they're allowed to do at this time. And as I sit here today, I don't know if Mr. Hess or myself will be allowed to be present at any particular site visit. I would need to check with the executive management of the water board to allow for this kind of thing. And my logistical concerns kind of, I don't know how to say this. My concern about the health and safety of the staff, whether or not the staff will be allowed to go, are kind of balancing against my concerns with the probative value of doing a site visit at all. And it seems unclear as to exactly what the probative value of a site visit is and whether or not that value outweighs the health and safety concerns of the staff. So those are my objections.
All right. So here's what I'm going to do. It's 11:08 by my clock. We're going to take a break. Let's take a break for 20 minutes. Well, till 11:30, so just over 20 minutes. That'll give Mr. Gonzalves a chance to assemble that data for the pounds produced in 2019, which he may already have, but just wait and we'll do that after the break. And then I also will confer with my staff regarding these site visit issues. And we will, I will make a final ruling on that. And then the other thing, just to alert you, I want to discuss today is I'm not going to have closing oral arguments. This is clearly a case that's complex enough that we need to have written closing briefs. What I'm proposing is that each party's brief be a maximum of either 20 pages double spaced, if you want to do it double spaced, or 10 pages single spaced if you do it single spaced. And I do want the each brief to address and hopefully have separate categories that address each of the 6 hearing issues that are stated in the hearing office's May 15 supplemental notice of hearing, and then basically state the response to the party's question that is stated in each of those 6 issues. My plan is, as I just mentioned, the briefs will be due after we complete the site visit, if we decide to go ahead and do that. And certainly after we've wrapped up any proceedings with Mr. Lowry, but it's going to be fairly short time after both of those things, because those are not matters that should impact your abilities to prepare most of your briefing. I think there may be some sections that need to be added, but most of your briefing you can be doing before that. So be thinking about what you think is an appropriate schedule, both if we have the site visit for when that should be. I've mentioned the 30 days for Mr. Lowry, and potentially an additional hearing date just for his testimony, and then how much additional time for briefing. So be thinking about all that. We'll talk about that at 11:30. We'll take a recess until then, and we'll be back at 11:30. Thank you.
It actually shows us.
Okay, just a minute. We'll all get back here and we'll proceed. Okay, so first of all, regarding the site visit, I did check with my staff and they confirmed that there are members of the Division of Water Rights who are doing site inspections now, at least in the cannabis program. I also know from my experience participating in managers' calls of the Water Board executive team that other divisions of the water right, other divisions of the State Water Board are in fact doing what we'll call site inspection. Certainly, Division of Drinking Water continues to inspect water treatment plants to make sure that they're compliant and that the people receiving water from them are receiving safe drinking water. And the regional water quality control boards certainly still are doing site inspections of wastewater treatment plants. So I don't think this is unusual within the State Water Board. My staff has informed me that the restrictions are no overnight travel is allowed, which won't be a problem here. This, I think, is about a 2.5 hour drive from Sacramento to the Merced area. We certainly will practice social distancing. We will make sure we're all in separate cars for driving down. So I don't think there are any insurmountable logistical problems that would prevent the site visit. So, and as I said before, I think it's certainly legally appropriate. The Water Board has done it in the past. Courts certainly do this from time to time. So I don't think there's any legal impediment to that. So I do want to proceed with the site visit. The next question, which I have not talked about with my staff, but I will talk with them and you at the same time, is what is a good date for this? Today is July 31st. I propose the dates that are open on my calendar, and there's no reason. Well, let me first ask, I don't think we need to wait for the Lowry record of survey to be done. Mr. Gonzalves, are the stakes that Mr. Lowry put in the ground still in the ground? You have to go off. There you go.
Yeah, they are true and accurate. He won't be changing any of that. So yes, they're there.
Okay, so we don't need to wait for that. So I'd like to get this done sooner rather than later. I will ask, I know this is short notice, but the dates available for me are next week, August 4 and August 4, 5, or 7. And I'm just going to ask, first of all, for Mr. Prager and Mr. Hess, and then for Mr. Gonzalez, are you available on any of those dates?
I don't know. I'm frankly, I'm unprepared to talk about my calendar or the calendar of the prosecution team staff.
Okay, I'm sorry to hear that because I did give you warning last night that I was going to talk about this.
Yes, I recognize that.
All right, so and Mr. Gonzalez, are you available on August 4, 5, or 7?
Yes, I'll be available for any date you choose that week.
Okay, and I'm just going to check with my staff. It looks like we can do any of those 3 days. I don't know that there's a lot of preparation needed for this, but there may be. So it looks like we can do the 7th. I think the 7th is probably our best bet. That gives a week to prepare, and we'll go from there. Mr. Gonzalez, what's your experience for what the driving time is between Sacramento and your property?
Yeah, I used to be able to make it an hour and a half when I worked up there, but I wouldn't recommend it.
All right, well,
2.5 with traffic is reasonable.
so we'll assume 2 to 2.5 hours. And so let's target for, I'm going to target it for August 7 at 11 a.m. And I will tell you the people from the Administrative Hearings Office who will be there will be me and Skylar Anderson and Kyle Woldridge. One of them will run a camera. We will, as I say, I will ask questions, which will still be under oath. Mr. Gonzalves and Mr. Hess certainly will still be under oath. If I ask them questions, if there's any new witness, I don't see any reason why there would be, but if there's a new witness to, again, just to explain what's out there, we will have them be under oath as well. So Mr. Gonzalves, where is a good meeting place? We can do some walking. We're all able to do that. Where is a good meeting place that is relatively close to the pond, but still on a public road?
There's 2 access points to my 2 parcels. One is the end of Shaw Avenue. It's a dirt road. And the other one is that 4185 Fisher Road. I'll put up a fresh mailbox. Some kids knocked it down. There's no home on that site. Is that 48?
Oh, okay, the end of Shaw Avenue would entail a lot less walking though, right?
Yes, and you can drive it all. I'll make sure it's all open for you to drive on.
Okay, let's, so is there going to be any issue where we're going to have trouble finding that or anything like that?
It's, if you Google the intersection of Shaw and Buhack Road, there's an address. What's the neighbor's address? I can give you the neighbor's address. I want to say it's like 4700 Shaw Avenue. It will take you to the dirt road.
Okay, so can you send us some kind of a drawing? You know, we can obviously all get to the neighborhood using Google, but can you send us a drawing that just shows us how to get there so we all know we have a clear point? And you can just email that to the Administrative Hearings Office email.
Sure, I'll do a metadata snapshot of a pin. I'll go down.
That would be good. And then we will send out a formal notice of site visit. I don't know whether any member of the public is interested in attending. I don't think I can exclude a member of the public. This is a public proceeding, although obviously for our social distancing protocols, we'll have to make sure that those are completely respected. So I think in our notice, we will ask if any member of the public is going to attend for them to advise us, just so we'll know. And of course, as I said before, we will make a recording and post that. I really don't think this will take more than an hour. I think this will take less. I mean, if we're there, we just need to walk around and see the lay of the land between the creek and the property and the pond, and that's it. And then we will probably be back, be done. I'm going to allow 2 hours just in case, but I don't think it's going to be necessary. So that will be the notice. Mr. Gonzalves, I really would appreciate if you could get me the Google Pin map, whatever it is today, so I can get that notice out Monday morning. Fortunately, you're all email accessible, so if we get it out on Monday, that'll give us several days. But that is my plan for that. And we certainly can do that without any overnight travel. So I don't see any logistical problems.
Mr. Lilly?
Yes.
I had sent a photo with the blue pin when I was down in the creek. I don't know if it had the roadways though. You may have one already of the.
Okay, well, why don't you check and just send us a new one? And if it's the same one you sent before, that's okay. I don't think what you sent us before though had a big enough picture. I don't think it had all the way up to Shaw and Buhack. So we just need.
I was in the hole, so I'll stand on the roadway and get a
zoom out a little bit so we can all find that. And I will send my cell phone number. So if somebody gets lost or is late, we will have a point of contact, either mine or Skylar's or Kyle's, one of ours. So we have a point of contact in case there are any issues. I assume you do have cell phone service there.
The only thing I might add is Mr. Hess and Mr. Prager met with me down there. I don't know if they had a pin on the 41.
I think it's best if you do this. You know the lay of the land better than they do. But they certainly have been there, so they shouldn't get lost. But that's what we'll do. I'll have a cell phone contact in case there are any issues, just so we can make sure. we
Mr.
can
Lilly,
all
I would like to just suggest that people wear tennis shoes or boots. I'm going to try to float the land down, but it's farmland. It's not paved at all.
Okay, yeah, we certainly don't need to get dressed up. No ties.
Yeah.
And wear outdoor clothes, and that's fine. We don't need to be formal for that.
Okay.
I think I will ask Mr. Gonzalves, will anybody else be with you for your party?
Just my wife.
Okay. And then Mr. Prager, apparently you're not able to say today, but I will ask in the notice for you to notify us who is going to be attending from the prosecution team, mainly so we can just make sure we can do roll call when we get there and make sure everybody who's
Of course.
planning to attend is there. Excuse
While
me?
I'm not able to confirm what date myself or Mr. Hess will be available, those are the two people who will be there.
Okay,
I don't think we're going to be bringing anybody else. It should just be the two of us. And if for some reason that changes, I will let you know as soon as possible.
okay, thank you. Yeah, and I don't see any reason, as I say, this is not going to be a big proceeding, so we don't need a lot of people. So, and certainly Mr. Hess knows that area better, as far as I can tell, better than anyone else for the prosecution team. So he's eminently qualified for this. So that is what we will do for the 7th. Today is the 31st. I said I would give 30 days for the completion and filing of the record of survey. So actually that will be 31 days, will be until August 31. That will be in our notice as well. I don't know. I think we should go ahead and set another hearing date, because I'm almost certain that after that record of survey is filed, I will want Mr. Lowry to testify, and I'm sure Mr. Prager will want to be able to cross-examine him, as is his right. So I'm going to go ahead and set a date for that. And then if we need to move it, we can. I was going to say September 4, but that's the Friday before Labor Day. People may be taking that off. And Mr. Prager may want more time to review the record of survey anyway. So let's do it. Let's do that. Our tentative next hearing date, unless there's going to be a problem, I'm proposing September 9 for our hearing date. Does anybody have any objections right now to September 9? And this hearing, I think we'll schedule it for 9 to 12, which should be plenty of time for this limited purpose. Does anybody have any problems with that date?
No.
Okay.
I don't have any problems with that date, but I haven't had an opportunity to really think about it. So I reserve the right to raise problems with that date later.
You may. I understand, but let's try to. Hopefully, we can all work out scheduling. And certainly, you've stated your objections, and I'm sure you will repeat them in your closing brief, and that's fine. So with that, then I'm going to.
I'm sorry, it sounded like you were about to wrap up, and before we wrap up, I wanted to get a point of clarification on what evidence will be allowed at the September 9th hearing date. It sounds like August 31st, Mr. Gonzalves will be allowed to submit Mr. Lowry's completed survey. Will the prosecution team be allowed to present rebuttal evidence to rebut that particular piece of evidence?
If you think that you need to, you can certainly raise that issue. That certainly seems like something that would be appropriate.
Okay, thank you.
And so what and of course you'll just get it on August 31st. So, and again, I know you don't want this hearing to go on, and neither do I any unnecessarily, but you can raise that issue Here's what you can do, Mr. Prager. You can raise the issue on September 9 and ask for another hearing day for rebuttal. Or if you can get your rebuttal done and filed before September 9 or be prepared to present it on September 9, you may do that. That would be preferable.
I see what you're saying, because the difference between August 31st and September 9 is only like 10 days. So
yeah,
9 or 10 days. So, right. Okay. So I understand what you're saying. If for some reason those 9 days aren't long enough for us to generate rebuttal evidence, I will raise that issue on the 9th.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if you have to have your own surveyor and they'd have to do technical work, it may take more time.
Yeah.
But,
Okay.
but just so we're clear, it's going to be limited. First of all, what Mr. Gonzalves is going to present on direct testimony is Mr. Lowry as a witness. And as I understand it, it's going to be, I will ask the question, Mr. Lowry, did you prepare this record or survey? I may have a couple of background questions, and assuming he says yes, and that is entered into evidence, and I probably will ask a few questions, or Mr. Gonzalves will, about, did you in fact put the markers out in the creek and on the other places on the property that we saw during our site visit, but for foundational, and then that'll be pretty much it for direct, and then you can do cross-examination. So that's what it's limited to, that purpose.
Limit the scope of what happens on the 9th, and that makes sense to me.
And then rebuttal obviously is limited to rebutting just that.
Yes.
So, okay. And the last thing is, I do want to set a date for closing briefs. I'm going to give you a fair amount of time because we have to have these other things take place. But as I said before, you can do probably 90% of your briefing, certainly before the site visit. And the record of survey, I don't think, as Mr. Prager has pointed out, this isn't the only issue in this case. So I'm not going to give a lot of additional time. Right now, pending if Mr. Prager has to submit rebuttal or decides to submit rebuttal evidence to the Lowry evidence, that may change it. But right now, closing briefs are going to be due September 18, 4 p.m.
September 18th.
And that's about 6 weeks or 7 weeks from today. So that gives, and as I say, please address 6 hearing issues. Hopefully, I prefer you have a separate section in your brief on each of the issues. And as I said, 20 pages, and this will be in the order, 20 pages double spaced or 10 pages single spaced limit. They're both due at the same time. Post them to the AHO FTP2 site. We will post them to the AHO FTP site after both of them have been filed. So if you want to file it early, but you don't want the other party to see it, you can go ahead. You don't have to worry about that. We won't post them so you can see each other's until they both have been filed with the AHO. I hope that makes sense. But that's just a fairness thing.
Mr. Lilly, I recognize that you want this to go fast, and I understand your logic that the majority of the work can be done over the next 6 weeks. But may I ask for a deadline of the following week of September? That would be, instead of the 18th to the 25th.
Okay. Do you have some particular reason or?
Yeah, I mean, my reasoning is this. It appears that you're finding the boundary issue to be particularly important in this case. And if the prosecution team is going to be presenting, I don't know this to be true, but if we do present rebuttal testimony, it's quite possible that even with the narrowed scope on the 9th, that there's significant issues that need briefing. And frankly, I just don't know what my capacity, my workload is going to be that week. And it would be a lot easier for me to draft cogent arguments.
Okay.
I was given
you've said enough. That's fine. We'll make it the 25th. But that does remind me, since it's harder to set dates later than now, let's just set September 16, 9 a.m. as a reserve date in case the prosecution team wants to submit the rebuttal to the survey. And then we'll have another week plus before the briefs are due.
That makes sense.
So let's do that. Hang on just a second. I'm going to write this down. That will be our rebuttal hearing date. It's a lot easier not having to reserve hearing rooms, I'll tell you. Okay, the last thing is my staff just sent me a text saying 11 o'clock is too late. We should do earlier for the site visit because it could get to be hot. And that seems like a valid point. So let's go ahead and make it for 10 a.m. instead of 11 a.m. for the site visit on August 7th. Is that acceptable? That's still not super early, but I think that can make a difference in case we have a 100-degree plus day. So we'll make that 10 a.m. on August 7th. Okay, so we will put these in an order, but just to recap, site visit, August 7, 10 a.m. August 31, I'm going to say 4 p.m. Completion and filing of the Lowry Record of Survey. Hearing date, September 9, 9 a.m. to noon for the Lowry testimony. Potential second hearing date, September 16 for prosecution team rebuttal testimony regarding the Lowry survey, and closing briefs due September 25, 4 p.m. Did I get any questions about those dates? All right.
The only question I have is, why don't we just, if the prosecution team is able to get a rebuttal testimony in prior to the 9th, why don't we just schedule the 9th to be a full day so we don't have to stretch it out?
All right, that sounds good. We'll say 9 to 5.
Just in case.
And I'm just going to alert you if we will want you to file your rebuttal testimony if you can. Well, shoot, I'm going to just, I'd like you to file it before, at least 2 days before the hearing, so that I and Mr. Gonzalves have a chance to look at it. I understand you may be a little time crunched, but if you get the Lowry survey on August 31, I'm going to ask if you want to have your rebuttal witness testify on the 9th, that you submit any rebuttal evidence regarding that witness by the 7th.
Yeah, okay, that's fair.
You understand? 7th,
Yeah.
4 p.m. And otherwise, if you can't do it, if it's technical, I understand it could be technically complex, and then the alternate would be you file it, if for the 16th, you have a little more time, so then I'd say you file it by the 11th.
Yeah.
All right, and we will put this all in an order. I realize it's a little confusing, but I think we're fairly clear. So then, just so you all know, the case will be deemed submitted when the closing briefs are filed, and then my office by law has 90 days after that to prepare our proposed order. And obviously, when we complete our proposed order, we will post it on our web page and email copies to both of you and also to all the other people who signed up to receive our emails. So is there anything else that we need to cover today?
I just have a question. I have not
Yes.
contacted Mr. Lowry yet. I was getting together these documents for 18 and 19 that you asked about.
Yes.
And I was wondering, do you want me to still submit these to you? We uploaded these grower payment reports to the AHO website, and I don't know, with the pounds is what you were looking at.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. That was a pending question. So please just, you told me for 2018, your total pounds was 18,952 for those 29 acres of almond orchards. Is that correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct. So we followed up with, we redacted our account numbers, but we sent it to you and it's titled as, That's referred to as the F3 Creek. It's the creek property. And then we also did 2019 and we send it to the AHO site.
Did you copy Mr. Prager on those?
We just
Did you include Mr. Prager as a CC on those emails?
No, sir. It just went to the upload on the AHO.
Oh, you uploaded them. Okay, just tell me the number of pounds for 2019.
43,540 pounds.
Okay, I will see what's uploaded and see what to do with that. I'm sure, I don't think we need that. I mean, you didn't provide those backups for 2014 through 2017. You just gave the numbers. I understand you're trying to be thorough, but the problem is if you try to offer new documents, then we have to allow cross-examination of those and so forth. So unless you see some reason, Mr. Gonzalves, I think your testimony of these 2 pound numbers is sufficient without the backup data. I mean, I'm glad you checked it to make sure you got the right numbers, but I don't know that we need to admit those into the record unless you see a reason for that.
Yeah, I was just trying to be as thorough as I could. So I agree with you.
Okay, I'd rather just have the pound numbers. That's the level of detail you provided for the other years, and I think that's sufficient. So unless Mr. Prager, you have an issue with this, my inclination is, since he sent them to me, I can either just send them back without opening them, or I can send them to you and you can look at them. But this probably is a rabbit hole we don't need to go down.
Yeah, my preference is that we don't use the documentation because it would be considered surprise testimony, and I haven't
Speak a little louder, you're breaking up.
I haven't had an opportunity to review this document that is being presented right now. I would prefer that it not be admitted into evidence. If Mr. Gonzalez wants to testify particular pounds, that's fine. I think they're relevant, so I don't need to see them.
Okay, so what I'm going to do, Mr. Gonzalez, is you have testified to these 2 numbers, which are in the record, and you're under oath, and you've certainly shown that you have knowledge of that. So I think that's fine. I'm going to just delete the grower records and not open those. I don't think we need those. And then I won't have to go through the machinations of processing them as exhibits. And certainly that seems to be what Mr. Prager's preference is. So let's do that. But thank you very much for reminding me about the numbers, because I did ask you about that. So is there anything else I've forgotten, or can we wrap up for today?
One last thing. In your notice of the site visit, I presume you're going to be issuing a notice saying that the AHO will be conducting a site visit at this place at this time regarding this matter.
Yes.
Is that notice going to include kind of the scope of the questions or the procedures that will be followed? You mentioned that the witnesses will be under oath at the time and you will be asking questions. I'm still unsure as to exactly what the procedures are for this kind of thing. And I'm asking if your notice will provide elucidation on what those procedures are.
Okay, we will have some brief description of the process. I think that's a fair request.
Okay, thanks.
All right.
That's it. I swear I have nothing else.
Well, there'll be other days, so don't worry. Mr. Gonzalez, what are your last comments?
Mr. Lowry isn't aware of any of this yet. I have to call him and notify him.
Okay.
If it doesn't fit his schedule, can I reserve the right to notify both you and Prager?
You can, Mr. Gonzalez, but I'll tell you right now, and I realize you don't control him, but my patience will be tested severely if this is going to take more than 30 days. And the reason is that I forget when Mr. Hess submitted his inspection report to you, but it was well over a year ago. The administrative, I can get the dates, they're all in the record. I know the the draft cease and desist order has been you received that well over a year ago. So you've had time. You knew this was going to be an issue. You received first Mr. Hess's inspection report, which certainly raised the issue of wetlands or riparian, and then the draft CDO. So I'm giving you a break. And Mr. Prager obviously has stated his concerns to allow 30 days, because I do want to have a complete record if we can. But I'll just say, if you can't get it in 30 days, you can tell me, but I'm not guaranteeing I'm going to allow you any more time. And I'm going to have a big problem if this takes more than 30 days.
Yes, sir. I apologize, but that wasn't what I was asking about. Is his testimony day is what I was trying to get to.
I'm sorry. If for some reason he is not, if he files the record of survey on August 31 as scheduled, and then he's not available on September 9, we can move that date if we have to.
I'm
And
sorry.
again, that's easier since we don't have to reserve hearing rooms the way we did before. Hopefully that'll work. I wanted to set out some dates, but if absolutely necessary, we can move that one around.
I honestly think, Mr. Lilly, that his numbers are already standing. He was waiting on other agencies like the Department of Water Resources to talk about the boundaries at the creek. So I think he can do his thing of printing and getting it stamped and certified. We do have the Merced County has to accept it. And
Okay.
I think that's
Well, and
okay.
if that takes more than 30 days, let us know. But if he has signed it and stamped it, and all you're waiting is for the recorder's office to get it back to you, we can still go forward. But let's cross that bridge when we come to it. Hopefully they can get it recorded too.
I'm not saying he signed it and stamped it yet because he's still waiting on DWR on the accretion and illusion, which is the moving of the creek thing.
I understand. I'm saying by August 31st, signed and stamped.
He'll get that part. The only part I was concerned about is his testimony, because I really can't say he's available on that day yet, but I will push for it.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you both very much. I hope you have a pleasant afternoon and weekend. We will plan to get together on August 7th, and we will go from there. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and close the hearing for today. Thank you.
Thank you.